Well, good evening, everyone, or good afternoon if you're on the other side of the pond. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all. I'm Samir Savant. I'm the Festival Director of the London Handel Festival, and I'm really, really pleased to have with me a stellar group of speakers who are a roundtable discussion, and everyone is involved musically in this project as well. We have, of course, Laurence Cummings, the musical director of the London Handel Festival, who will be conducting the performance on the 5th of April from St George's, Hanover Square, Handel's church. We have Edward Jones from Harvard University. We have Jonathan Babcock, who's representing two choirs, the University of Texas State Chorale and the Episcopal Church of the Good Shepherd. And we have Lisette Canton from Canada, who's again representing two choirs. We've got, she conducts the Ottawa Bach choir and the chamber choir of the York University in Toronto. I hope I've got all of that correct. So just some housekeeping from me. We are recording this session so that people who aren't able to make it can watch it on YouTube afterwards. And we will send you the link so that you have that in the next few days. But because we're recording it, we ask you to put yourself on mute and also to turn off your cameras so that on the final recording, it's only the person speaking that is seen. And then just to run through how this will work, I've got some questions for all of our musical directors to ask one by one. They're all involved in this amazing project, and you all are too. And at the end, then we'll turn over to you for questions, and we hope the event will last an hour. Although you are on mute, we'd love to hear from you who you are and where you're from, maybe which choir you sing with or choirs you sing with, and which country you're from as well, because this is a very international gathering here. And also to remind you that we have another one of these coming up next Wednesday. We have two specialists from the Foundling Museum here in London. And the Foundling Museum was where, of course, Handel was a governor, and he gave some of his first and successful performances of Messiah in London under the auspices of fundraising for the Foundling. So our specialists from the Foundling will be talking about that, and we'll be sending details about that towards the end of this week, but please make a note in your diary for next Wednesday. So over to my colleagues, our choral, wonderful, lovely choral directors. And I'm going to ask Jonathan first, which is, what were when we first approached you about this project, Messiah Reimagined, what were your initial thoughts and first impressions? Jonathan. Oh, you're on mute, Jonathan, sorry.
Someday I'm going to learn to turn that, to stop doing that. My initial response was that I was flattered to be asked to be part of such a wonderful festival, a renowned festival. And secondly, I was just so happy to have something to do. Ours is a choir. We tour often. We do big performances, big projects all the time. And, we've just been, puttering along usually. So to have a big opportunity like this was kind of exactly what I needed. I needed and what my students needed. A lot of fun.
Great. Well, we're really looking forward to hearing your two choirs. And Lisette, what was your first reaction?
Well, again, I was honored and very excited to be part of this. When the whole pandemic started, the Ottawa Bach Choir, which is a professional choir, we just won the Juno Award in Canada, which is like the American Grammy Awards. And so we were slated to be going to Bachfest Leipzig in June 2020. And of course that got canceled. And so we were all depressed. But they decided to proceed with the reimagined St. John Passion, and we were part of that. And so we got some good experience making virtual videos of some of those parts of the St. John Passion. And then we started doing our own virtual videos during the summer when we couldn't do anything. And so we did some Bach motets, and we did various other things. And then we did actually resume slowly in the fall, and but we kept doing these virtual videos. And when you asked, I thought, wow, this is excellent, because of course I am in awe of this festival. I think you're wonderful, Laurence. We've worked together with Dan Taylor a couple of times, and of course, Adrian Butterfield. I've worked with many times, and what an absolute honor to be part of it, even if only virtually. But we actually just finished recording these choruses, and what a fantastic way to bring us all together despite us all being apart. So thank you again. We're just honored.
And we're really looking forward to hearing your choruses as well, Lisette. Thank you. Edward, you're quite a newcomer, aren't you? You've really helped us out by replacing some of the choirs that had to drop out because of the pandemic. So it's all happened quite quickly. What were your impressions?
Oh. Well, firstly, thanks for having me. And it's a little intimidating to be speaking to Handel twice on this Zoom, to see his portrait, not once, but twice. So hopefully he'll approve. But I actually watched the one in December. One of our students forwarded to me and said, this is brilliant. And I started watching, and I'd actually been on leave from Harvard at this time last year. Working with King's College London, the choir there, directed by my friend Joe Fort. And the first choir that I saw was KCL, actually. I thought, this is fantastic. And so I emailed with Joe and said, great job, and with the students. And he said, well, let's keep in touch about this. And then I got your email, Samir, which was a delight to get. We hadn't really been doing, we did a virtual carol service at Harvard, like so many others. They're recording their little bits at home. And we're working on various things this term. But it was great to have a project in the middle of the term. And so it was, fairly late. And so it's not going to be the full group. The choir is about 40 members. And then we have a smaller 16 voice subset that sings every day for the chapel services. So it's going to be about 16 or 18 of them. But I hope that will work out well. They're busy recording at the moment. And we'll be sending those in. It's such a wonderful project, and congratulations to everyone. Congratulations to Laurence to be able to conduct to your own guide tracks. I think is incredibly impressive. So well done for that.
Yes, thanks, Edward. So Laurence, it's very much a new skill, isn't this, conducting along to your own click track? And you and I have been talking about this project for several months now, and obviously we worked together on the 3rd of December performance. But can you remember what your initial thoughts were and how your thoughts have developed on this project? Oh, you're on mute, Laurence, sorry.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd love to say a wonderful welcome and thank you to our choral partners, and it's wonderful to have musical directors with us this evening. And it's our honour to have you, so thank you. To be honest, I remember when we had the initial conversation, and my heart sank a little bit, to be frank, because it was at that time, obviously it was very early on in the pandemic, when nothing was happening. It was very hard to think of anything positive. We were doing, I'd been involved in a few online projects, and I was feeling pretty lonely, and I thought, oh really, is this how Messiah is going to be? And then of course when we realized we were able to do a mixed media thing of having some live element, I thought, oh, that's good. And then of course it's wonderful to hear the musical directors talk about their choirs. It's a wonderful way that we've been able to bring people together. And so, having initially felt a little dejected by the prospect, actually it's enlivened me, and it's been very, very exciting to be able to reach groups that we wouldn't normally be able to afford, to be honest, because it's obviously long distances are able to be covered, and also just fresh talent, mixture of ages. It's got everything we're looking for, really. Just this idea of bringing lots and lots of people together who wouldn't normally be in one room, and making a sort of collective project celebrating this great work. So I'm fortunate, I suppose, because I've been involved since the beginning, that it's got more and more exciting, and I'm thrilled that we're working towards this performance for Easter.
Brilliant, thank you, Laurence. And Lisette, you mentioned already, I mean, your Ottawa Bach choir has been very busy. You mentioned about the St. John Passion from Leipzig, which I watched. Congratulations, a wonderful performance on Good Friday. And that partially was the inspiration for this project, of course. And congratulations on your award as well. So how it seems as if you've actually been quite active during lockdown with your choirs.
Well, I think like everybody, thank you very much for your kind words. Like everybody, we've had to find ways to move forward. And Canada is a very large country, as you know, and each province and each area of each province is in a different zone. And so in Ottawa, I mean, even though we have people that come from different areas, Ottawa's been, for the most part, um, able to not be on a constant lockdown. So we've been able actually to meet in person. We met last fall and we did a, we're all doing concert recordings. So with a production company and digital platforms. And so we started doing that. And we then they went on another lockdown. And so then we're resuming now again. So we're doing another concert coming up. And then we have one coming up at the end of April, early May. So we've had to modify things quite a bit. But especially in the professional world, we feel it's really important to continue to have the arts presence in society. People, especially with mental health and well-being, we feel that it's important to bring music to people at all times. So we've been continuing with that and making sure that we do it safely, of course. And then on the other side of things, my university ensemble is in Toronto, which is a big hotspot. And so they've been locked down for most of the year. And so we've been continuing over Zoom, which is difficult, as everybody knows. But we've been making it work. And so I taught them how to do the virtual videos. And so they did a couple before Christmas in preparation for this project. And I including them as well, because it's wonderful, of course, to be mentoring, the next generation and the next level of singers and introducing them. I know that in London, in England, of course, that everybody, in the womb, it comes out knowing the Messiah, but not so much in other countries, and that has to be learned. So it's been a wonderful way to help educate them and to bring them into this amazing project. So thank you so much.
Great. No, that's wonderful to hear. And Ed, your conducting is obviously very closely related to the university term as well, and it must have been quite tricky with all the teaching and trying to fit all of this in. What has your choir been up to since lockdown started?
Well, Harvard has had, I think, sort of 20% of its population back on campus, so very limited, and they've got quite draconian rules about what they can and can't do. I think rightly so. It's been very cautious. And so unfortunately, even though we have this fantastic large space in the center of the campus, we're not allowed in the building at all. So everything, as with Lisette, has been done over Zoom, which, as we know, has its challenges. There's something quite powerful about knowing that some of our students, we have one student in India, a couple in France, several in the UK, actually. There's something extraordinary about knowing that at the same time, even though my first words to the choir are put yourselves on mute, which might be several choral directors' dreams, but not so, in all cases, is to know that tapping, without wanting to get too sort of zen about it, but tapping into the kind of universe's sound waves, we can't hear each other, and yet we're all singing the same piece at the same time in different time zones. We're having, the universe magically connect us all. It's pretty powerful, and I think we'll probably get to it later about some of the advantages and some of the things that we'll take as positives from this. But we have been doing our rehearsals via Zoom. I think, as Lisette said as well, in terms of the well-being, not just of our audiences, but our singers. I mean, we all know about the great health benefits of, singing, just like yoga, of doing a very long exhale and a controlled exhale in terms of, releasing endorphins and things. And I think that's been incredibly powerful for our students to have this. I mean, the pressures of doing a very rigorous academic curriculum, on Zoom while living with parents, which they weren't planning to be doing. This is something that I take very seriously in terms of the kind of restorative part of their day, just getting along. Even though I can't hear what they're doing, I can see, we can see where the tension is and the vowel shapes. It's been interesting talking to colleagues who are voice teachers about, who all so much concerned with the beauty of the sound, which they can't get over Zoom, and actually have to focus on slightly different things of technique, which has been quite useful in itself as well. So we've been keeping going. As I said, we did a Christmas Carol service, and then we're working on various projects this term, all via the, people recording themselves to the guide tracks, which is a new experience. One that will probably get old if we have to do this for much longer, but I think for now it's tolerable.
Thank you, thank you. And Jonathan, you've obviously got your two choirs. You've got the university choir and you've got the church choir. And presumably the church choir had, I know they've kept going because we've seen some of the clips of them singing Evensong. How about the church choir, and how has it been different for your university choir as well?
Well, with the university choir, through this whole thing, I've kept on my mind this idea that, that this is their 4 years of time that they have to be in college, or, especially high school kids, all their final dances and everything. So I really wanted to make sure, and the whole School of Music, as we worked towards opening in the fall, really wanted to give them as much of that experience as we could. So we really went to work. Several colleagues of mine did a lot of research on how the virus spread and how music could be made. And we did a really good job of rearranging what we do. For example, rather than being in the choir room, which I love the choir room, we're rehearsing in our big auditorium. So there's more airspace. The airflow in that space is better than in the choir room. We've purchased each singer in the program a special singer's mask that pretty much is built out away from your face so you can actually take a breath without sucking in the mask. And it also has 3 filters on it, and one is removable and can be changed out. And our whole university, we're very proud to say that we haven't had one case traced back to the university, a university event or class. Anything we've had has been from outside contact. So we've had a lot of success, but of course, we've got the masks on. We're at 7 feet apart in an auditorium, which is challenging to hear. But my students just stood up to the cause, and we did a performance of Britain's hymn to Saint Cecilia. I thought that was particularly appropriate at these times, and we did a few other things. But we were still able to perform. We were still able to honor our seniors that were going to student teaching. We just did it as a pre-recorded event rather than having an audience, and we released it online. So we're still able to do, even though it's harder.
Brilliant, thank you. And Laurence, you and I were just chatting before. You've actually been quite busy just these past couple of weeks with a couple of concerts as well.
Yes, I've been very lucky to do chamber concerts with the Academy of Ancient Music and the English concert. And the exciting thing for me was they both involved travel. Not very far. One was in Cambridge and one was in Bath, but still that thing of leaving the house with a purpose to go somewhere and make music was a fantastic thing. And I'm also involved in some online learning things. We're doing a course on the Bach B minor flute sonata, which has been fun to do, and keeping going. Obviously planning for this and planning for things in the future. So fingers crossed, getting to do a couple of concert performances of operas coming up, and yeah, it does feel like we're moving in a certain direction, and it's very good that we're all being cautious about it. But for me anyway, it feels like there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Indeed, thank you. Just a note to all our participants, and none of you have done this yet, but please do introduce yourself in the chat and tell us where you're from and which choirs you've been singing in. Perhaps if you're in our Sing at Home chorus, say that as well. We'd love to know where you're from, because looking at your names, it looks like a very international bunch, but please confirm that to us. Thank you. So my next question is about virtual choirs, and Ed, I'll ask you because you were mentioning some of this. Do we feel that virtual choirs are the way forward? There are obviously pros to this, but cons as well. How do you think coming out of lockdown we will think about virtual choirs? Ed?
I think we will take aspects from the rehearsals, for example, on virtual choirs, and we will take them and probably integrate them somewhat into rehearsal experiences. I think it's quite nice, the idea. I mean, although there are guide tracks available online for a lot of the big pieces, it's quite nice to be able to do one of those yourself and then actually not concerned so much in a rehearsal of note bashing again and actually going a little bit more deeply into the music. So I think that will have a positive effect. One of the things I was thinking of is with a big community choir of about 150 voices that I direct, of which I wouldn't normally do something like a Palestrina Mass with that size group, but actually on our Zoom rehearsals, we have been working through various repertoires that we might not get a chance to actually perform in person. And several of them are like, well, we've never, heard a Palestrina Mass before. We've never encountered a Palestrina Mass before. And that's quite nice to be able to talk through a lot of the, theology, liturgy behind it and everything, as well as rehearse it in this format. So I probably, like most colleagues, are just sitting at the piano singing at them, which is quite an unpleasant experience for most of them, and they're singing along with it. You can actually do some interesting things tuning wise. If I sing a note and I say, well, okay, think about where a real pure third above that note is, they can still do that kind of thing and actually hear, even though the sound quality on Zoom is not great, try and do those sort of things. So we can certainly use, I wish I was slightly less incompetent with technology. And I think, even though I've challenged myself many times during this pandemic to do something about it, my lethargy has sort of taken over again. But I think I'm going to try. I did purchase a microphone. That's my first thing that I've actually done to try and make the sound a little bit better. So I think there definitely will be positives. I like the idea of, a project like this, and of course the fabulous St. John Passion that came from Leipzig on Good Friday was just mind-blowing, I thought, to be able to integrate kind of, this really is global integration. And I think that might change post-pandemic. I think probably the idea of, probably at the highest level, the idea of companies flying in singers from all over the world and stage directors and conductors, even to, like, the thing that makes me wonder at the staggering cost of it is flying in understudies to cover at the Met when, there are millions of fabulous singers in New York itself. I think that will probably change, actually. I think music is going to become a little bit more localized in the same way that kind of the organic food movement has taken over. And I actually think that's going to be really positive for communities, not to have someone just fly in and then fly out, but to get deeply rooted into the community that they're in. So I think there are great positives, but it will also be so nice to be back in the same room making music. Because you get, sorry, I've talked way too long on that, but there is an energy in the room that you only get when you're with other people. That's an obvious thing to say, but it's worth bearing in mind when we're thinking about choirs.
Yes, absolutely. And that difficulty of not having the people on either side of you kind of supporting you. And we've had this a lot from the Sing at Home chorus, who are just terrified of taking breaths in the wrong place, because you normally, when you're singing live with people, you can, you absorb what's going on around you. And that's been quite weird to get used to, I suppose. Lisette, your opinion of virtual choirs, pros and cons?
Well, like Edward, I kind of think that we'll take some positives from this. I can tell you that I do not want to continue to be doing rehearsals on Zoom, because I mean, it's kept us together and it's kept us going, but it's certainly far inferior to coming together. And but you know, the positive aspects of it are, you know, I have become a technological whiz on this stuff, and as I'm sure a lot of people have had to really learn how to how to do these kinds of things. And we will take some things like, you know, getting together, perhaps, you know, the breakout rooms that we've been using to do sectionals. People can, you know, outside of rehearsal time, they can come together and do those kinds of things. If somebody is sick, you know, they can zoom in to a rehearsal instead of just missing it. You know, those kinds of things I think are positive. But yeah, there's nothing that beats the in-person. And, you know, there's a whole skill, as we all know, with rehearsing as an ensemble. And that's what I have found. Every time we have to go weeks or months without singing together, when we come back together, I mean, even the Ottawa Bach Choir, they're so, you know, they're pros at this, but, you know, these skills start to fall by the wayside. And so you have to relearn how to sing together. And then you have the distance issue. We have to sing with the masks. You know, it's a challenge, relearn how to breathe. So those kinds of things are challenging when you come together. But boy, there's just nothing that beats coming together, and everybody is just breathes a sigh of relief when we can finally do that. So yeah, so let's take the positives from it, but I don't see us in the live music industry relying on this for future music making. But the virtual videos, that has been a really nice way to bring a piece of music together. Mind you, you really need a good sound engineer, as you know. So.
Yes, and you know, it's a new industry now, isn't it? These people that, I mean, the technical team behind Messiah Reimagined are students at the University of Surrey who are doing specialist courses like the Tonmeister course, which is kind of world renowned. But I think going forward, there's going to be generations of people learning this as a new skill. And talking of learning new skills, Jonathan, you're dealing with younger singers, aren't you? I mean, do you feel that they've really taken to the technology, or is it a hindrance because their younger voices, less experienced?
Well, my students are college age 18 to 21, and honestly, they teach me most of what's going on. They tell me how to do it, or they tell me what I'm doing wrong. You know, that you know, it's always fun to learn from your students for all the same reasons that my students don't like the virtual learning and participation for all the reasons that have already been said. But also, for me, and I think probably for all of us, one of the strongest things that draws us to choir is a sense of community, of singing together, being corporate together that way, but also being at the water cooler. And I particularly think of my church choir. My volunteer choir has not gotten back together again since all of this started. And it really concerns me, because there are some of them that's what they do. That's their night out, is going to church choir. And now there is the challenge with the more, I want to be careful, more advanced aged singers. They don't know how to do the technology. And I tried a couple times to get them to do something like a virtual choir, and they were just too afraid to buy into it. They just didn't think they knew how to do it. It just frightened them a little bit. And I'll just follow up with, the original question was, are virtual choirs the way forward? And I just really want to get in there. God, I hope not. I hope that is not where we go forward from here. Although I'd also like to mention, there have been pieces written for virtual choir. Eric Whitaker wrote a piece, Fly to Paradise. And it was a really cool effect. And since that was the intention of the piece, we always want to be looking forward in terms of artistry. But as a regular meal, I don't think virtual choir does what a choir does.
Sure, thank you, thanks. And Laurence, you've had this very particular experience of directing hundreds of singers that are in our Sing at Home chorus and never really meeting them, but they've all met you. They all know you very well because you've prepared these downloadable rehearsals and people have been singing according to that. And what's your opinion of how these choirs might be, progress in the future?
Well, I think, I mean, as my wonderful colleagues have said, there are things we can extrapolate from the what we've learned from this situation. I have to say, I'm on the low tech side still, but nonetheless, I mean, for instance, I had great fun making the videos for the Sing at Home choir choruses, imagining that my music studio was full of the friendly faces of a come and sing choir, and what they would want to know, what they need to know, trying to make them laugh, to not get too serious, and so they can relax and feel their bodies, and all the things that we always try and do. And of course, I think in some ways, for instance, for a one day come and sing event, it'd be fantastic to have preparatory videos that people can watch and zoom in on, possibly sectionals, etc., before the day if they want to, because it will just save time. And I think we'd all agree that certain planning meetings have been great, that we can have Zoom meetings and suddenly you're able to actually have a proper meeting with lots of people it would normally have taken months to actually organize. And I have to say, the highlight, though, for me, of the Zoom experience that I really think we should take forward is events like tonight, where you get people who can come together, share information, share experiences, and it helps the worldwide Handel community, I think. So I think we should be encouraging these forums. I know a lot of choirs have had sort of guest nights where they have speakers and that sort of thing, and I think that's a wonderful way of bringing people together, and there's no reason why we shouldn't include that, I think, in our portfolio of communications.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this particular event, Laurence, you and I are on this side of the Atlantic, but our colleagues are on the other side of the Atlantic, and we wouldn't even have dreamed of doing something like this before, but suddenly it becomes possible, and there are no boundaries, really, which is wonderful. And of course, yesterday was Handel's birthday. I think he was a very international person, and he would be very pleased and very proud. We can feel his spirit with us on the call. And Laurence, I'm going to start with you with my penultimate question, which is, why do you think Messiah is still popular? Can you explain the enduring popularity of this piece?
Well, I mean, apart from the fact that it was set up very well by Mr. Handel himself, because of course he gave these performances for benefit concerts for the founding hospital, and then bequeathed his parts and his organ to the hospital in order that the performances could continue, which is very generous on one level, but of course it's guaranteed a certain longevity to the piece. But I mean, of course, its humanity is extraordinary. I mean, Handel's wonderful understanding of the human condition, and in the three parts of Messiah, the way he portrays the innocence and the beauty of the birth and the sort of purity of that, then to the awful things that mankind can inflict on each other, to enlightenment and resurrection at the end. Everything done with such a sort of light touch, and he plumbs the emotions at every point where you really want it, and I think we all feel at the end of Messiah better people, which is what Handel wanted, of course. And also he wrote fabulous tunes and matches the words so brilliantly, so the rhetoric is always there, the power of the music is there, and I think it sort of moves our souls, which is the main thing.
Brilliant, thank you, Laurence. And Jonathan, how, the piece was written, over 250 years ago, and yet it's sung all the time by choirs all over the world. What do you think is the popularity of this piece?
Well, I'll offer an American expression. Every single movement is just a home run. It's out of the park, every movement. And as I was thinking coming into the interview of how I was exposed to Messiah, in my church choir we would sing one chorus, "For unto us a child is born," and then in my school choir we do a different one. And immediately you get the fire of it. You never forget the chorus, and every time you sing it, it just gets better. You feel like you're putting yourself in a pair of comfortable shoes, maybe are a bit stiletto because it does get difficult, but still, pieces that we know and love. And just to echo what Laurence was saying, I think the librettist Jennings is the untold hero in this piece, because the libretto is just absolutely genius. It's almost a gospel within itself. I think there's something like 60% of the text comes from the Old Testament, which shows the convergence from the Old Testament to the New and the prophecy. It's a sermon or a gospel within itself. It really is.
Great, thank you. And Lisette, you've got a particular view on this, because obviously Ottawa Bach Choir is professional, and yet professional singers love singing Handel choruses, and you've got your student singers as well, so bringing that kind of fresh approach. Why do you think the piece is still popular?
Well, I mean, I echo what everyone has been saying so far, but I think Handel brings us, on a couple of levels. Certainly on the musical level, he brings us a freshness, and he brings an approachable atmosphere to this major work that we perhaps wouldn't feel with some other larger pieces of music. And what I mean by that is that he, it's brilliant writing, but he gives us some fugal writing, but he doesn't take it too far. So, we have these fugal moments, and then he comes into this communal, chordal aspect in every single chorus. And so, I find that it's very approachable for choirs, no matter whether you are, just learning as a student, or whether you're professional. Of course, the product would be different. So I think it's a fresh approach on the musical level. And then I think on the theological level, I think his mastery of telling the entire Christian story is really quite universal. And especially in the English-speaking world, he just tells this in a way that is very approachable and understandable by everyone. And it, like Laurence said, it just leaves everyone feeling our souls are nourished after we sing this piece. And so I really think Handel understands how to make these things work in this kind of context. So he makes it so that it can be difficult, but not to the point of pushing it. Although "Let Us Break Their Bonds," that's a pretty difficult one, especially at your tempo. But yeah, no, I mean but it's not 16th notes all the way through it, that you get, perhaps with some Bach pieces. And so he knows how to balance. And I think that's what he's really a master of, is balancing the musical aspects, the emotional aspects, as well as the theological story, the Christian story. And it just is masterful. And it has stood the test of time, and it nourishes our souls.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Ed, you've got a very unique perspective on this piece, because you're British, so you would have conducted and performed it in the UK, and now you're in North America. And is there a difference between the way the attitude towards it in this country, in the UK, and in the US? Why do you think it's still popular, the piece?
Well, I think, as Jonathan said, I mean, it's everyone is a hit. It's a bit like Aber Gold. Every single thing on there is dynamite. And not only that, but it gets better as it goes through. You feel it can't get any better. And then the next piece is better than the one before. I think, you know, especially in Boston, there's such a huge tradition of doing Messiah every year that it is in people's consciousness, tapping into that. You know, even though Messiah is not a Christmas piece, we all know that, but it taps into that kind of nostalgia around the holiday season and everyone doing that. That's so important. I never quite, you know, people say, oh, it's much easier to sing them Bach, and I'm like, it really isn't, because you think about those pieces that started off as those wonderful early Italian duets, they're incredibly difficult. And whenever I sing the piece, and actually this one, I have such sympathy for people singing these virtual choirs, because whenever I sing, I sort of hide next to someone who really can sing. Okay, I'll leave that bit to them, that's fine. But you can't really do that on a virtual choir. I also grew up as a trumpet, a very bad trumpeter, so I have the sort of nerves of Messiah as well, having to play that as a young trumpeter, which everyone says, oh, you can just play trumpet and that, you play trumpet. And like, actually, it's quite a hard piece to play, and let alone your guys who do it without any valves or any help like that. But it's such an incredible, it is just part of the sort of consciousness, I think, musically. I mean, it's not without its issues theologically, as people have pointed out recently. I mean, there's always that juxtaposition between when you do thou shalt dash them, and then suddenly it's like, hallelujah, dashed. And, you know, there are issues with that, but it's such exquisite writing, and just there is something that gets within your soul. I mean, I think all Handel actually in some ways is like that. All those sort of you know, Israelite oratorios, they do something amazing to the collective mindset of a choir. You know, they are in most of the cases representing the kind of ancient Israelites, and the sense of community, and, you know, the succession in Britain and all the things that go along with that. But there is something that the collective mind really taps into in this piece, and Handel has, obviously, you know, the way he writes all his ceremonial music is just so brilliant. So yeah, and as a proud Welshman, I grew up singing this in Wales as well, where you know, people sing pretty heartily. So that was a good upbringing.
Yes, it's a big sing, isn't it? You really feel as if you've given your lungs and your diaphragm a real workout when you've done.
Yeah, I mean, unless you know, the only equivalent thing is like singing, you know, 30 or 40 verses in Welsh of one of those great William Williams hymns that just go on forever. You know, preaching in itself. They're terrific.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ed. So I'm coming to my last question. So to ask the room to have your questions prepared and to type them into the chat, and I'll look at them and ask our panelists in turn. So my last question, and I'll come to Lisette first, if I may, is what is the future for this great piece? I mean, how do you see it being performed in 100 years' time, say?
Well, I think people are reacting to it creatively. I think there's, you know, always the traditional authentic performance never goes out of style. And I think people want tradition. But on the other hand, I mean, there was just recently a pandemic project with one of the opera companies here that does things a little bit differently against the Grain Theater. They did what's called the Messiah Complex. And they juxtaposed the movements of the Messiah with different languages that are found here among peoples of Canada. And they included some of their specific pieces that were indigenous to their cultures. And they juxtaposed that with every movement of the Messiah. And it was really quite popular, and people loved this new, I mean, if you're reimagining it, this was another way to reimagine how to move forward with this piece, and to make it, you know, diverse and appealing to many different cultures. So, you know, people are doing so many creative things now, and I think we'll never, of course, lose the traditional aspect of it and its historical significance. But it's nice to see people branching out and including, you know, a whole other aspect to this piece. And I think that will continue.
Brilliant. Thank you. Ed, what do you feel is the future for this piece?
Yeah, I echo what Lisette said, and actually that Messiah complex, sorry, my complex, was incredibly powerful. I mean, especially in the light of everything that's going on in America, particularly, but in the world at the moment, was just an extraordinary document of what, you know, a work like Messiah can do in society today. I mean, I think, you know, there was a statistic that I had to read several times to believe it, that Chorus America came out with, which is that in the United States, 1 in 6 adults over the age of 18 sings in a choir, which I just think is extraordinary and absolutely brilliant. I mean, the converse, unfortunately, is that 1 in 4 educators say there is no choral program in their schools in terms of the young age kids. So that's the disparity that needs to be addressed. But I think in terms of choirs, once we get back to singing in person, you know, I think there'll possibly that statistic will even go up. I think there might be an upsurge in terms of people singing. I think the future of the piece is very strong. I'm going to say it's going to keep living and keep doing it. But I think, as Lisette said, you know, with this sort of creative reimagining that the London Handel Festival is doing and other people, you know, it not only can survive anything, but it will thrive and it will bring up everyone around it through just its being. So it's a great icon.
Great, thank you. Jonathan, what are your thoughts?
Add one thing before you go to Jonathan, sorry. I want to echo that, because in Canada, the statistics here are 28,000 choirs we have. 3.5 million people in this country are singing in choirs. And, you know, this is a testament to how powerful our industry, our genre of music is, and how powerful the Messiah is. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to echo what you're saying there, Edward.
Great, thanks. Jonathan, what is the future for this piece, do you think?
Well, in addition to what my colleagues have said, I think the future of it is what it has always been. It's a monument. It's a cornerstone of our art form. I think one would be hard pressed to go to a person that lives in the Western world that hasn't heard the Hallelujah chorus. That might be a bit of an overstatement, but you know, it has been a part of our repertoire canon forever. And I love projects like Lisette was talking about earlier, where we could reimagine it or reimagine it. We can do it in different ways. We incorporate technology. We can do staging that wasn't there before. There's enough imagination within the piece that all sorts of other art could be added to it.
Brilliant, thank you. And Laurence, I mean, you must have conducted dozens of versions of these with so many different types of singers that don't have English as their first language, all kind of ages and abilities. What do you feel is the future for the piece?
Well, I mean, I think its universality has come through from all of us tonight. We all think it's an important piece for humanity, and I think that is what will carry it through, because it's a robust piece, dramaturgically, musically, and it's wonderful that we get all these different reimaginings, you know, for instance, our own, as we've just been saying, and also stagings. I've been involved in those over the years, and you know, just personally, every time I come to the piece, there's something new, and we always discover a new element that we hadn't noticed before, a new connection, and somehow it also, you find something that resonates with your own experience of something that's happened recently. So it continues to reinvent itself in that sense. So I have great confidence that it'll be going for many years to come.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so questions from the floor, and I see we've got one from Charmian from the Newcastle Choral Society. Charmian, if I may, because this is an international gathering and you're talking about a UK instance, but I'll broaden it out. It's how do we all feel about the you know, the way that it feels as if the performing arts are kind of deprioritized compared to other activity that's happening. Even though Lisette, as you've said, it's core for our kind of well-being and all this kind of thing. And, how do we get through this situation when we feel as if, we're kind of last in the queue, if you see what I mean. Maybe Laurence, I could ask you first.
Yes, I was sorry, just checking what the original question said. I don't know that I feel too far down the route map, to be honest, because I think the time we've been behind was at the beginning. I think we've been at the bottom of the heap. The arts have been very left behind by the government, and I think a lot of my colleagues are struggling, falling through the cracks. We have no funding, no help with income. But that said, I think what we've now been given as a way out is full of hope. Actually, I think for once we now have a strategy that I think will work. We're very lucky in the UK that the vaccination program is going well, and I do feel very hopeful now that people are listening. And there are other issues that we don't need to go into in the UK at the moment for performing artists that make life very difficult. I'm talking about Brexit, of course, but let's move on. And that all needs just clearing up, and ways will be found, I'm sure, to make it work. But it's not working at the moment. And I think the only thing we can do is to be positive. I hope that some of my colleagues who have had to give up, that it's only temporarily that they're having to do that. There are some very fine singers I know who've had to take on other jobs and are potentially not coming back to singing, which makes me very sad. But I hope that when things pick up, we can gather together and prove how important the work is that we do.
Brilliant, thank you. And Lisette, obviously with Ottawa Bach Choir, you've got professionals that are depending on it for a living. It must be really tough on them. How have they managed to cope, and what does the future hold for them, do you think?
Well, yeah, like Jonathan initially said, we kind of banded together in Canada, the directors of professional choirs, and we started collecting research from around the world. And we started to communicate and educate, if you will, the government bodies and public health. We started sharing all of this information. We continue to do that, and to make it clear that this is important, because of course, people who don't deal with this every day, I think they don't have it on their radar, and they have to be reminded that there are many more people than they understand, that not only sing in choirs, but that help contribute to the economy. And this is always kind of the take one has to go with. And so we keep reminding them that, yes, this is important. This is the research that has been done. And just like any other sector that is coming back slowly, we should not be left behind. And so we have been doing that, and government bodies, in terms of funding, have been very supportive here in Canada to help us continue to do that. So we take that very seriously, and we continue to make sure that people know that this, I mean, we're not doctors, but we are in a sense, because, people have been really struggling through this time, and they've been missing the arts. They have been, and we've got this whole opportunity has been presented to us that we can share now on these worldwide digital platforms. And so we've been developing that along with a lot of other people. And so we've been trying to, I guess, go with the flow and change with the times, but make sure that those that make decisions and that are powerful are being reminded that this is indeed an important aspect of society, and that it can't be pushed to the bottom. So we've gotten some vocal in a respectful way.
Yes, thank you. Jonathan, what are your thoughts?
You know, just as everyone said, this is just a tragic, unparalleled situation, and we've all been changed, and in many ways changed forever. But I feel really confident. Humanity needs the arts. Humanity will long for the arts. I don't worry much about whether or not our audiences are going to come back or our participants are going to come back. If anything, they're going to come back in droves because they miss it so much and need it so much. So you know, there's no way around that. This is just an awful situation for performing musicians. There's no two ways about it. But we will come out, and we will be strong again, and we will have audiences again.
Wonderful. It's great to hear your positivity. And Ed, any further comments from you?
Not really, just echoing that. I mean, I think it was unfortunate that right at the beginning of the pandemic, you know, this report came out that said singing was the most dangerous thing in the universe. And I think you know, I'm not going to question the science because I have no scientific background, but I think some people have questioned that in terms of it being so much more dangerous than like people shouting at each other or playing sports in close contact. I'm slightly envious actually of the UK timetable for going back to performance in America. I'm also very optimistic in America with our new person in charge, to put that there. So I'm hoping that things will be stepping up. The one experience, I should have said this in the Messiah bit, the one Messiah I did apart from playing various ones singing at people was in the back of a U-Haul truck in a very cold car park just outside of Boston with a group that's called the Driveway Choir. And they're actually brilliant. They're two sound engineers. We got 12, I think, maybe young professionals who we divided up the solos between. I was playing on a keyboard in the back of a U-Haul truck. Each of the 12 had a microphone in their car, and they were mixed into a soundboard, quite well done actually. And then that mix was broadcast on an FM signal to like 100 chorus members in cars around this big warehouse car park lot on a very cold December day, which was a novel experience. I'm hoping we won't need to do too many of those before we can actually get back to doing them in person. But it was another example of, you know, creativity in this time. I think I echo everyone. I have no worries about the need, the hunger. I think, you know, most psychologists realized before this pandemic that the real pandemic is loneliness, actually. And, you know, the world, you know, and in our Western cultures where we're so focused on what we're doing now, like looking at a screen, we're not thinking about community as much in terms of real life connections. And I think it has taken this pandemic in some ways to realize that, you know, real friendships are more important than Facebook friendships, that kind of thing, and that people will be getting out in droves after it's over. And of course, with the caveat and the worry that some of these organizations, like some of our favorite restaurants, like some of our favorite pubs, won't make it through. And that's a really sad reality.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that very positive response, on which we will end our event tonight because we're just on time. So thank you everyone for being brilliant timekeepers. And on behalf of you all, I'd really like to thank our 4 choral directors for taking the time out to talk to us. And as I say, it will be available on YouTube afterwards, so you can watch it again and tell all your friends about it as well. So if I could ask the participants to leave gracefully, but thank you everyone for being with us, and we really look forward to the 5th of April. So
thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.